Now, the first thing you need to do is calibrate the camber checker. So what you do is you just get a flat wall surface, put the camber on top of a level, put the level up against the wall, and make sure that that is perfectly level there. And then from here, what you do is you simply turn the little dial underneath until it is on 0. So then you have it calibrated. And as you can see, that is 0 there. So that's the calibration. And now we'll move on to the actual car. So now the next thing you do is place the camber tool onto the disc, the brake disc, and if there's any groove at the top of the disc, try to lower it down because that will put off the actual reading. So here, if I look at this one, I can see that the camber is significantly negative. It's -1, maybe pushing on 1.5. And as a consequence of that, there's going to be more inside wear on the tire. And if you have expensive tires like I have, Goodyear, you're going to be spending more money than necessary. So this whole process is to reduce that problem. And also for safety. So that is it. So I've got that measurement, and now I take note of what it is. So that's -1.5 or thereabouts now. I take note of that, and we'll take off the wheel and progress to the next stage. Now, what I forgot to state, which I should have stated, is that when you place the caliper measurer on the disc, there we are, make sure that the actual caliper is level as well. So you can see the level there in the middle. And then when I checked it again, it's just a slight bit negative. So that's very important that you are very precise in placing the caliper on the disc, otherwise you will get a misreading. So previously I stated that it was -1.5, but now it's just about on a 0 rate reading. So on a neutral reading, just slightly negative, but that is important to check. Now, again, another aspect here is to do the 2 wheels at the same time, the 2 rear wheels in this Discovery 3. It just saves time and you have more balance. Okay, so here is my setup for the jacking up of the vehicle, Discovery 3, and this is the rear. So I'm using a 10-ton hydraulic jack, a pair of them, and I'm also using axle stands, preferably 2-ton or above, and they're in place. So you jack up the vehicle first, make sure you're not under the vehicle as you're jacking, and you may need to use the 2 together as a pair to jack up one side and then go to the other side and jack up the other side. So that is the setup, and the load is evenly distributed among the stand and the hydraulic jack. It's very important to maintain safety, and if you want to be extra careful when you take off the wheel, put that under the vehicle as well to give further support in case of a catastrophic stand or jack failure. Now, taking off the wheel then, here we have the wheel, and this is Discovery 3, and this is also for Discovery 4. These are quite heavy tires and wheels, so the technique I use is just to put the actual wheel in between the thighs and just move in under the vehicle, making sure that you've loosened the bolts first, the nuts first, before jacking up the vehicle. Now, it is officially a 22mm nut, but because of these particular nuts on the Discovery 3, they do begin to become warped because of being taken off and on over a period of time. I use a 23mm. It's slightly more loose, but it is better fitting, and especially I have found for those nuts that are distorted, it can get those removed. And then we have the breaker bar. The longer the better, the more easier. So I'm just going to take off the wheel now and progress to the next stage. Okay, so I've just taken off the wheel, and as you can see there, precisely what I suspected. On the inner side there, you can see on the inner rim there's a bit more indication of the start of wear in comparison to the outer side. Can you see it's less wear there? So that is the reason why it's important to ensure that the camber is level. In my opinion, neutral, 0 or thereabouts. And yeah, let's progress on now to adjusting the camber on the rear. Okay, so we've placed the camber measurer back on the disc with the wheel removed, and place it exactly in the same place as where you had it previously. And again, make sure that you have it aligned correctly, so that is in the middle. And then the next step is to adjust the wheel down here to move the actual level. So if I move it anti-clockwise, you can see there the camber measuring tool realigning. So we're going to place it exactly, we're going to set the reading exactly to where it was before we took the actual wheel off. And I believe it was a 0, just slight -0 as there. And now we get to adjust the camber bolt, which is there, and I'll be doing that next. So I have that all set up there now, and I'm now going to adjust the camber bolt accordingly. So now, just to show you the setup and the bolts. So what we have here is obviously 2 breaker bars on either side of the bolt. And on the nut side, you loosen the nut first. Never ever loosen the bolt, as that will cause damage. So the nut is the one that you loosen first. What am I using? I'm using a 19mm extension socket on this side. And for the actual bolt itself, it is, I believe, 24. Let me just check there. It is a 21mm socket for the bolt, 21. This is for the rear of a Discovery 3. And that is basically it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to loosen the camber nut, and then we're going to adjust accordingly the actual camber bolt until that goes to 0. And that's the way I like it. That's within the parameters of the manual for Discovery 3. Again, the whole process here is to reduce down the excessive wear on the tire and keep the tire from wearing out prematurely. So what I have done is I have loosened the bolt on the camber, and to loosen it, as with all bolts, you loosen it in an anti-clockwise direction, and now it's loose. All I need to do now is to adjust this bolt based on the measurement that I want here, which is going to be negative, which is going to be 0 camber. Okay, in terms of techniques, for those of you that are not familiar with this, you hold the actual camber nut, which is there. You hold that in place, and then you use your hand to turn the bolt accordingly, which adjusts the actual camber angle. And as you can see here, it's moved slightly, and you just need to make sure that that bolt, that nut, is loose, otherwise it can damage the camber. Now, just checking, ready to tighten up that camber bolt. I have adjusted it so that it is just slightly positive by a few degrees. So it's not exactly on negative camber, but it's just slightly positive, because as a general rule of thumb, based on my observations, the rear camber tends to push towards negative over time. So I'm just making that slightly positive. Now I have we're going to tighten it to 130 Newton meters. So you need, officially it's 133 Newton meters using a torque wrench, but I would say 3 Newton meters out won't be too bad in terms of the wrench that I have. So it's 133 Newton meters, tighten it, and again you're keeping the camber bolt solidly in place. You're observing that the camber does not move as you tighten the actual nut.